Part 3. Let's look at CERT-In compliance implementation. Challenges in implementing the CERT-In audit guidelines and how to address them. Challenges. Well, multiple teams operate in silos, leading to confusions during audit. This is a case of fragmented governance. To address it, you can create a cybersecurity governance committee with cross functional representation and a clearly defined RACI metrics for audit execution. Second is incomplete or outdated inventory of systems, APIs, shadow ITs, cloud assets, or third party tool. This is a case of having poor visibility of your assets. To address it, you can maintain a centralized CMDB. Easier said than done, but it's required. Use an automated asset discovery tool and tie audits to the latest asset inventory. Classify assets by risk if possible. The next challenge is audit scope missing critical assets. This is a case of having unclear audit scope definition. To address it, you can use risk based scoping aligned with the business impact. You need to include your cloud, third party, staging environments by default. The next challenge is the application may not follow secure SDLC, thus making them ineligible for audit. This is the case of lack of secure development practices. To address it, you can enforce these CERT-Ins no secure design equal to no audit rules. You need to integrate your OWASP's ASVS, SAST and DAST and secure coding policy into your SDLC process. The next challenge is many organizations don't evaluate vulnerability using standardized scoring system, which is primarily an organization is unprepared for CVSS or EPSS mapping. You need to use tools that support CVSS and EPSS scoring system. You need to train your security teams on proper mapping to the database of CVCWE. The next challenge is your IT and the security teams are already stretched, thus leading to delays or incomplete testings, which is a case of resource constraint during audit. You can address this by allocating a dedicated audit response team. You need to schedule audits during low load period and use your internal readiness checks before engaging the auditor. The next challenge is missing version histories, configuration baselines, patch records, logs, and POCs. This case of inadequate documentation. You can address this by establishing a pre-audit evidence checklist. You can look at automating documentation using CI/CD logs, Git versioning, and backup config snapshot. The next challenge is having a mismatch between the auditor's expertise and the domain. This is a case of auditor's readiness gap, a real challenge when a wide range of industries are involved and the same auditors have to do that activity. You can address this by selecting domain appropriate auditors from the CERT-In empaneled list. Interview audit team beforehand and document audit expectations formally. The next challenge is audits conducted on live systems can disrupt operations if not managed properly. This is a case of production system risk during audit. You can address this by using staging or test environment. Approve high risk testing in writing or help with mirroring the production system securely. Going forward, the next challenge is critical findings may remain open due to poor tracking or lack of ownership. This is a case of delayed remediation post an audit. You can address this by assigning remediation tasks via ticketing systems with SLAs based priorities. You can schedule follow up audits for closure verification. The next challenge is failure to submit the metadata to CERT-In within the 5 days, which may trigger penalties. This is a challenge of gaps in the CERT-In data submissions. You can address it by designating a CERT-In reporting SPOC, also by maintaining ready to submit audit data template, using calendar reminders and compliance dashboards. The next challenge is evidence collected by auditors may be scattered or incomplete or might be insecurely stored. This is a case of inconsistent handling of evidence. You can address this by following the CERT-In's data handling policy. You need to use encrypted vaults with restricted access and issue data wipe certificate post the audit is completed. The next challenge is having lack of control over the third party systems integrated with your critical application. This is a case of vendor and third party gaps. You can address this by extending audit clauses to vendors. You can address this by conducting third party risk assessment. You can validate controls using the SOC reports or direct reviews. The next challenge is having multiple audits which are overlapping. This can lead to confusion and redundancies. This is known as a case of audit fatigue. You can address this by building a control mapping matrix to align CERT-In with other frameworks, thus streamlining evidence reuse. The next challenge is the leadership may not grasp the technical audit impact, leading to low prioritization. This is a case of lack of executive involvement. To address this, you can use executive summaries and risk heat maps. You can conduct board level briefing during entry and exit meetings. The next challenge is teams may misunderstand the certain languages. This is a case of misinterpretation of guidelines. To address this, you can conduct internal workshop and training. Use the CERT-In published FAQs, use their handbooks and their implementation guides. The next challenge is organizations may not be ready to act on breach related findings during an incident. This is a case of having a weak incident response integration. To address this, you can align with the CERT-In's 2022 directives. You can create a CERT-In compliant IR system, which is incident response plan, backed by the playbook and a 24/7 SOC support. The next major challenge is the audit seen as a one-time event instead of an ongoing posture check. This is a case wherein we have a lack of audit readiness culture in the organization. To address this, you can promote audit always on culture. You schedule periodic audits. Treat certain audits as a baseline for broader organization maturity. Proactive best practices to overcome challenges. You can do that by running internal mock audits using certain checklist. You can maintain a central GRC dashboard with real-time audit status. You can integrate audit KPIs into performance scorecard and IT and security teams for your IT and security teams. You can appoint a permanent audit readiness coordinator, and you can subscribe to certain advisories and update controls quarterly. These are some of the best practices to overcome few of the challenges that we listed earlier. Let's now look at a compliance checklist for BFSI sector. Let's go with first governance and board oversight. You need to bring in the CISO and the risk committee, and the task would be to approve the cybersecurity audit strategy and the annual plan. That's the CISO and the risk committees. You bring in your internal audit team and compliance team for the certain audit frequency and scope integrated into annual risk assessment and audit calendars. You need to get this team to define the calendar, perform your annual assessment, define the scope, define the frequency for the certain audit. You need to bring your CISO and audit team during your entry and exit meetings with your board and senior management. You need to schedule and document them. You need to bring in the compliance and the CISO team again, or compliance and CISO, to report on the compliance aspect in the MIS. Second part of the step is from a policy and process integration perspective. You need to update your ISMS and cybersecurity policy to include your certain audit mandates. For this, you need to pull in CISO and your policy governance team. You need to incorporate secure coding and SDLC requirements in software development and procurement policies. This is a place where you get in your IT team and your application development team involved. Next is you need to embed secure software clauses in your RFPs and vendor contracts. This role needs to be played by your procurement and your legal team as RFPs are involved. You need to include your CERT-In controls in vendor risk assessment management, and SLAs. For this, the right team would be your vendor management office. The next aspect is asset management and scope finalization. You need to maintain an updated inventory of all critical assets, including your apps, infrastructure, APIs, ICS, OT, cloud. This is a role which should be played by your IT asset management team, so you need to pull them in. Then you need to classify that asset based on your data sensitivity, business impact, and regulatory exposure. This is where your risk team and your CISO would play the role. Once done, then you need to define your audit scopes annually in consultation with business units and internal audit team. You need to pull in your IT risk and your compliance team into this conversation to drive this aspect. Once done, then you need to map your third party and hosted asset to audit scope. This is where you get your vendor risk and your CISO involved. Then we move on to the secure development and app lifecycle controls. The first is to ensure secure coding trainings are in for all in-house developers. This is where you need to bring your learning and development team, your app development team, and the leads of these apps. You need to enforce the SAST and the DAST and open source dependency scanner. This is where your application security team and DevSecOps team would need to play their role. You need to document version controls, change logs, and staging environment for each release. This is where your DevOps and the quality team will come into play. You need to enforce CERT-Ins, as no audit without secure development rules. That is, stop the audit if insecure. This is where your CISO, your QA team, your audit coordinator would need to bring in their weight. Once done, you move on to the next, which is audit engagement readiness aspect. First, you select your CERT-In empaneled auditor from the public list. This is where your audit coordinator will have to play a role. Then you need to verify the credentials of proposed audit teams. Hope there are no interns, no moonlighters, etc. The responsible team would be your internal audit team and your compliance team to ensure this is all in place. Once done, you need to the next one to ensure NDA is signed by the audit team and access are restricted to India-based infrastructure only. This is where your legal and your CISO comes and plays the role. Once done, then you finalize the scope, methodology, and tooling plans with auditors in writing. This is where you bring in your CISO and audit SPOC. Once done, you need to share your onboarding briefs and escalation metrics with internal teams. This is where your audit coordinator would play a role. Then you move on to execution and oversight. First one is to provide required access, test credentials, and documentation securely. This is where your IT ops and the SOC will come into play. Once done, then you monitor all the audit activities. Ensure DOS, flood, social engineering tests have written approvals. This is where your IT security team and your CISO comes into play. You need to confirm audit data are encrypted and stored only on India-based systems. This is where your audit SPOC and the CISO will come and play the role. You need to ensure timely communication of high-risk findings during audit. This is where the auditor and your IT security team would play their role. You need to track daily progress with the point of contact. You need to record the findings during exit conference. This is played by the audit SPOC. Once done, we move on to the reporting, closure, and follow-up aspect. In this, you review and sign off the draft or the final report with CISO, internal audit, and IT. This is where your CISO and the CIO will come into play. Once done, you need to report to top management with executive summary and board level risk mapping. This is where your CISO and the risk officer will come into play. You need to ensure vulnerabilities are patched in priority order with documented evidence. This is where your IT team, your DevOps team, your SOC team will come into play. Once done, then you have to arrange follow-up audit to verify closure and update final report with confirmation. This is where your auditor and the CISO will come into play. Once done, then you need to share your audit metadata with the CERT-In within 5 days, which is mandatory. This is the role played by the audit coordinator. Once all this is done, then you issue and store auditor data wipe certificate. This is done by the CISO and the compliance team. The last aspect in this case would be training, awareness, and continual improvement. The first is to train your internal teams on the CERT-In expectation. This is your learning and development and the CISO team, which need to come in and play. Once done, then you need to include the CERT-In audit lessons in the cybersecurity tabletop exercise. Here, the risk team, your SOC team, and your DR team would play the critical role. Then you need to conduct your mock audits or internal readiness checks. Need to be done quarterly. This is where your internal audit team and your CISO plays a role. Once done, you need to gather feedback from last audit cycle and submit to CERT-In. This is where your audit coordinator comes and plays his role. This checklist ensures BFSI institutions can demonstrate top-down governance, technical readiness, vendor and development team alignment, audit transparency, and continual security maturity. Let's look at CERT-In compliance checklist for telecom sector. The first part is governance and senior leadership involvement. In this, you need to include the CERT-In audit plans in the organization's cyber risk governance framework. For this, you need to loop in the CISO, CTO, and the Chief Risk Officer. Second step is to schedule entry and exit briefing with senior management, especially for NOC and DC audits. Here you need to get the regulatory team and the CISO office involved. Step 3 is to submit your audit coverage summary in annual compliance report. In this, you have to get your regulatory liaison team involved. The next step is to align your CERT-In directives with TRAI, which is the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, or the Department of Telecommunications Cyber Compliance Calendar. For this, you need to loop in your legal and compliance team. The next is from a policy, process, and compliance integration perspective. You need to first update your information security policy to incorporate CERT-In directions. In this, you have to get in your CISO and your policy governance team involved. Step 2 is to enforce inclusion of secure by design control in all network rollouts, core infra upgrades, and 5G deployments. This is the time when you involve your CISO and your network engineering team and the heads of that team. Step 3 is to ensure process documents for BSS, OSS, and so on reflects the audit traceability. This is where you have to pull in your operation heads and the planning heads. Step 4 is to integrate your CERT-In audit clauses into your third-party agreements. Hence, you need to loop in your legal and procurement teams. The next aspect is from asset inventory and scope definition. Step 1 of this process is to maintain an up-to-date inventory. The inventory should include your MSCs, VSCs, BSS, OSS, core apps, your APIs, your data lakes, your DNS, DHCP, IoT, edge system details. This is where you bring in your experts and the heads from an inventory perspective, and of course your CISO. Step 2 of this is to classify each assets based on your business criticality and its threat exposure. This is where you get in your risk team and your network strategy head involved. Step 3 is to include APIs, signaling systems, and subscriber facing portals in your audit scope. This is where you bring in your CISO, your value added services head, your application security heads into the loop. Step 4 is to validate cloud, edge, NFV workloads and are included in the scope and controls mapped to the CSA CCM. This is where you get in your cloud operation heads and teams and your security heads involved. The next aspect is from development, procurement, and change management. The first step is to ensure all in-house and vendor developed systems follow secure coding guidelines. This is where you bring in your app development team, your value-added services team, your product development team together. Step 2 is to apply the SAST and the DAST and third-party library scanning for portals, self-care apps, and provisioning systems. This is where you would need your DevSecOps heads and leads and your application security teams involved. Step 3 is to document and track all configuration changes, your patch rollouts, and firmware updates for audit systems. Here you would need your change advisory board team, leads, heads, and your IT ops heads and your leads in this space to come in. Step 4 is to enforce CERT-In rules. No audits on systems without secure development proof. This is where you get in your quality team and your audit SPOC involved. The next is your auditor engagement and planning. You need to select auditors from certain empaneled list with telecom audit credentials. This is where you get your regulatory leads and teams and audit SPOCs looped in. Step 2 is to verify team is not composed of freelancers or temporary staffs. This is where your compliance team and internal audit will play the role. Step 3 is to establish formal non-disclosure agreements, ensuring no audit data leaves Indian jurisdiction. This is where your legal team and your security governance team would play a role. Step 4. Pre-approve all penetration testing, DDoS, and signaling first test. This is where you need your CISO, your NOC team, and your core network team to get involved. Step 5. Share and freeze the audit scope, assets versions, and test plan in advance. This is the role of the audit SPOC. Once done, you move to the next phase, which is execution and monitoring. Step 1 is to provide secure access to your labs, test beds, staging environments, and pre-prod systems. Here you would need the support of infra ops and the security admin team. Step 2 is to ensure logs and telemetries are collected from firewalls, routers, EMS, NMS platforms, etc. This is where you would need the support from SOC and the NMS team. Step 3 is to monitor audit execution and ensure no unplanned downtime or traffic degradation occur. This is where you need NOC, the quality team, and the SOC team to get involved. You need to record all findings, observation, and text activities securely. This is step 4. Your audit coordinator is the one who would need to get involved and drive this. Step 5 is where you escalate when required any high risk observations immediately to CERT-In and the organization's top management. This is where CISO would play his role. The next phase is reporting, remediation, and closure. Step 1 is to review findings and recommendation with cross-functional teams. Here you need your three top, your quality head, your CISO, and your CTO to come in and drive this. Step 2 is to prioritize the remediation and assign SLA based fixes to system owners. You need your engineering, you need your SOC team, you need your service management team to come and drive this. Step 2 is to schedule follow-up audits after patching and secure configuration. This is where the auditor would come in with your audit SPOC. Step 4 is to share the final report and metadata with CERT-In within 5 days. This is where your CISO and your audit coordinator would play the role. Step 5 is to securely delete audit data from auditor's device and receive a data wiping certificate. This is done by the auditor and the compliance team. They would drive this aspect. Next part is training, outreach, and quality assurance. The step 1 is to conduct the CERT-In audit readiness training for your NOC, your IT team, your app dev team, your SOC team, your legal team, and regulatory teams. This would be led by your learning and development team, spearheaded by the CISO. So all have to have a buy-in. Step 2 is use lesson learned to update your internal security standards and standard operating procedures. This would be led by your quality team and your risk team. Step 2 is to participate in CERT-In briefings and share the best practice. While it is voluntary, this would generally be led by your regulatory affairs team. Step 4 is to ensure feedback is collected post-audit and sent to CERT-In. This would be definitely driven by the CISO and your compliance team. There are some optional aspects specific to the telecom sector. The first is lawful interception gateway security. You must ensure no backdoors are in place or no and can way to verify configurations. You need to monitor your DHCP, DNS. This is to ensure that high value attack surfaces for telecom are covered. You need to monitor your IoT network edge device. This should be part of the new audit scope. You need to ensure that firewall configuration are in place to ensure their signaling based attacks which are high risk are monitored. You need to monitor or audit recharge portals. Since it's an app based application, so you need to conduct your full SAST and DAST here. The CDNs and the caching nodes need to be ensured that they are all patched and configurations are updated. From a cloud native function perspective, you need to map the CSA, CCM and secure orchestration policies. CERT-In compliance implementation checklist for hospitals and healthcare institutions. Part 1 is from governance and regulatory alignment perspective. Step 1 is to assign a cyber security governance committee, including the CIO, CMIO, and head of compliance. You need to bring in the hospital management into this play. Step 2 is to include CERT-In audits in the hospital's annual compliance and risk management framework. Responsible team would be from compliance and legal. Step 3 is to ensure alignment with other mandates, whether it is the NMC guidelines, HIPAA as applicable. This is where your CISO and your legal counsel will play the role. Step 4 is to submit an audit related summary in board or ethics committee report. This will be driven by CISO and compliance heads. Phase 2 is policy, standard operating procedures, and procurement integration. In this, step 1 is to update hospitals' IT and cyber security policy to reflect CERT-In guidelines and rules. This should be driven by CISO and your policy governance heads. Step 2 is to include secure by design requirements for all medical softwares and health tech vendors. Would be driven by your procurement team and your IT team with your biomedical team. Step 3 is to mandate inclusion of certain audit provisioning in all IT contracts and your annual maintenance contracts. This should be driven by your legal and your procurement team. Step 4 is to integrate your certain directions into your standard operating procedures for data breach handling and response. This should be driven by your compliance team, legal team, or IT security heads. Then we come to the phase of asset management and scope planning. Step 1 is to maintain an updated inventory of your hospital information system. Second, radiology and PACS, laboratory management systems, IoT medical devices, imaging machines, patient portals, mobile apps, cloud hosted services. This task should be driven by your IT, biomedical, and application admin teams or heads. Step 2 is to classify the asset by risk, which include patient safety, sensitive health data, which is PII or PHI, or clinical operations. This should be primarily driven by CISO or your risk heads. Step 3 is to ensure cloud vendors hosting patient data follow the CSA Cloud Control Metrics or CCM. This should be driven by the cloud admin head or vendor management head or the teams or the leads of that team. Step 4 is to include internal IT, EMR, IOMT, third party labs, telemedicine platforms, or in the audit scope, primarily driven by the compliance lead and CISO. Next phase is secure development and application readiness. Step 1 of this phase is to enforce secure development practices for in-house or vendor-built software. Should be driven by your IT heads and teams, DevOps teams and product heads. Step 2, you need to require SAST and the DAST scan before application development, ensuring open source libraries are monitored. Should be primarily driven by your DevSecOps or your quality team. Step 3 is to ensure software build and patch history are available and can be tracked in version control, primarily driven by your IT heads, leads and your app dev teams. Step 4 is to ensure no audit rule for apps built without secure coding standards. So that should be your policy, that should be a standard, that if your app is not built with secure coding, there won't be an audit for it. It's a big red flag for that department. Hence, driven by your IT governance team and your quality team. Next phase is auditor engagement and pre-audit preparation. Step 1 of this phase is to select auditor from CERT-In, an empaneled list with prior healthcare or critical infra experience. The responsibility lies with the compliance and your IT governance team to lead it. Step 2 is to review and approve declared team members, ensuring there are no interns, no third-party staff or moonlighters in this. Again, driven by your compliance and audit coordinators. Step 3 is to formalize the non-disclosure agreement, ensure data residency requirements are met, driven by specialists or the leads from legal and IT team. Step 4 is to share audit scope with CERT-In auditors and freeze systems to be tested. Would be driven by your IT leads and your audit SPOC. Step 4 of 5 is to conduct internal pre-audit readiness check at least 2 weeks prior to the formal audit. This will be driven by your internal audit team and your CISO. Next phase is audit execution and oversight. In this phase, step 1 is to provide isolated, monitored access to health, PACS, lists, cloud system and IOMT interfaces. This will be driven by your IT security and networking team. Step 2 is to provide a dedicated point of contact and secure environment for audit tool installation and scanning, primarily driven by your IT and admin teams. Step 3 is to coordinate time windows for scans to avoid patient care disruption. This will be driven by your clinical operations or IT leads. Step 4 is to ensure all data collected are encrypted and managed per hospital privacy standards, primarily driven by your audit SPOC and your IT security leads. Step 5 is to escalate any critical vulnerability to the management and to the CERT-In immediately and should be driven by the CISO. The next phase is reporting, closure and follow-up. Step 1 of this is to review draft report with IT, your application security team, your clinical informatics and compliance. Primarily would be your quality team and your CISO team. Step 2 is to include executive summary and risk to patient care impact in final preparation to management. This will be driven by your compliance and your risk officers. Step 2 is to implement fixes by severity and by assigning patch ownership to his, list, packs or vendor teams, primarily driven by IT leads, vendor teams and SOC teams. Step 4 is to conduct follow-up audit to verify vulnerability closures. It will be driven by your auditors or CISO. Step 5 is to submit audit metadata to CERT-In within the 5 days as required by the guidelines. This would be driven by your audit coordinator. Step 6 is to receive auditor's data wipe certificate after secure deletion. This will be led by your compliance lead or legal team. The next phase is training, awareness and continuous improvement. You need to conduct your audit awareness session for your hospital IT team, nursing admin team, doctors, data entry team. This will be driven by your learning and development and IT teams. In step 2 is to run phishing simulation and awareness campaign for social engineering prevention, driven by your IT team and your CISO. Step 3 is to track audit learning and feed them into your standard operating procedure updates and IT security review, driven by your quality team and your risk management teams. Step 4 is to send audit feedbacks to CERT-In for national quality benchmarking. This would be driven by your compliance team. In summary, the focus area should be HIS and EMR security, which includes your patient records, e-prescription, discharge summaries. It could be your image server security, which stores large volume of sensitive diagnostic images. It could be your IOMT and smart ICU device, which often overlook attack surface with weak authentication. Focus area could be telemedicine and patient portal, which is high exposure, often cloud-based and mobile first. The next focus should be your third-party labs and diagnostics chains. They may integrate via API or share patient data. That's why it is relevant for them. The focus is on emergency services and DR systems. Why? Because from a CERT perspective, these are life critical systems and must have high uptime and secured fail over. CERT-In compliance implementation checklist for e-commerce companies. Phase 1 is from governance and strategic oversight perspective. Step 1 is to establish a cross-functional cyber security steering committee including legal, product, engineering and compliance. In this, you would need to get the CISO, the CTO and the Chief Operating Officer involved to lead it. Step 2 is to include certain audit scope and frequency in the company's cyber risk register. This is where your risk management leads and your compliance leads would need to take their roles. Step 3 is to schedule the CERT-In audit briefings with board management and track security KPIs post audits. This is where your CISO and the CEO office would lead this. Step 4 in this is aligning your CERT-In compliances with PCI DSS, ISO 27001 and with Indian DPDP Act. This is where your legal counsel and your GRC leads would take their responsibilities. Phase 2 is from policy, standard operating procedure and vendor integration perspective. Step 1 of this is to update the cyber security policies to include CERT-In guidelines, directions and roles. Your GRC and the CISO would drive this aspect. Step 2 is to integrate secure by design and DevSecOps clauses into your RFEs and vendor SLAs. This is where your legal team and your procurement team will take the lead. Step 3 is to ensure third party services are included in vendor risk programs. This would be led by your vendor management team. Step 4 is to document a CERT-In aligned incident response policy and escalation matrix. This should be driven by your IT security team and your SOC team. Next phase is asset inventory and risk based auditing scope. Step 1 is to maintain an updated inventory of your e-commerce platforms, your cart and checkout flows, your order management systems, your warehouse and fulfillment APIs, your payment gateways, your loyalty engines, your chatbots, and your recommender systems. This should be driven by IT asset management team and your platform engineering team. Step 2 of this phase is to classify the system based on sensitivity, which is your PII, payments, inventory operations, and customer accounts. This should be led by your risk team or your security architecture team altogether. Step 3 of this phase is to include your front desk, your backend team, your APIs, your admin panels, your partner apps, and microservices in your audit scope. This should be driven by your AppSec team, DevOps team, QA team, together or individually. Step 4 of this phase is to track your third party scripts and include them in your scope. Primarily should be driven by your platform engineering team. The next phase is to secure development and DevSecOps integration. In this, step 1 is to mandate the OWASP's SAST, DAST, SBOMs generations for every release pipeline. This should be driven by your DevSecOps and CI/CD teams. Step 2 is to ensure secure coding training and OWASP top 10 awareness across engineering teams, led by your learning and development and your security champions. Step 4 is to enforce dependency scanning for open source packages used in shopping carts, payment APIs, etc. This should be primarily be driven by your application security team and your DevOps teams. Part 4 is to reject audit requests for any app module built without secure development practices, primarily driven by your QA and the product security team. The next phase is engagement with the auditors and pre-audit controls. Step 1 is to shortlist the CERT-In empaneled auditor with consumer tech or e-commerce experience. You should drive this through your GRC and your legal team. Step 2 is to verify the auditor's team complies with the guidelines. There shouldn't be a temporary staff or interns or freelancers. This should be primarily be driven by your compliance team. Step 3 of this phase is to share the audit scope, versioned system inventory, and test environment with the auditor. Should be driven by your audit SPOC and your DevOps team. Step 4 is to document pre-audit rules, test boundaries, and constraints, primarily driven by CISO, quality team, or legal team. Step 5. You need to sign an NDA and agree on data handling policies. Primarily around the Indian data residency, encryption, and deletion certificate. This should be driven by your legal and IT team. Next phase is audit execution and controls validation. Step 1 is to ensure auditors have secure, read-only, time-bound access to test environments. This should be driven by your IT or security admin team. Step 2 of this phase is to pre-authorize tests like API fuzzing, DDoS simulation, session management validation. Should be driven by your quality and SOC teams. Step 3 is to provide logs, config snapshots, IAM settings, and source code as agreed, and would be primarily driven by your application security team or your DevOps team. The next phase, part step is monitor the audit execution. Ensure uptime and customer experience are unaffected. This should be primarily driven by your NOC and your SRE team. Step 5 is to report high risk vulnerability to the CERT-In immediately. This should be driven by the CISO. The next phase is reporting, closure, and follow-up aspect. In this, step 1 is to review draft audit report with engineering, DevOps, security, and product heads. This should be done with CISO and QA team. Step 2 is to finalize the report with all version details, test conditions, and signature sign-offs. This should be driven by your compliance team, auditors, and legal team together. Step 3 is to prioritize remediation by severity, need to track fixed progress, and Jira or ticketing systems, whatever is applicable to you. Primarily driven by your engineering managers and quality teams. Step 4 is to conduct follow-up audit to verify closures of all issues, driven by auditors and CISOs. Next step is to submit the audit metadata to CERT-In within 5 days of completion, driven by your audit SPOC. The last step in this phase is to ensure auditor deletes the audit data and share the secure wipe certificate. This should be done by the GRC and CISO leading it. The next phase is training, awareness, and continuous improvement. Step 1 of this is to conduct periodic CERT-In audit readiness session for tech, fraud, operations, and legal teams. This should be led by your learning and development and CISO. Step 2 is to update the security playbook and deployment checklist based on audit learnings, driven by security engineering and SRE leads. Step 3 is to add CERT-In compliant review step in pre-prod release checklist, led by QA and DevOps. The last step in this phase is to submit the audit feedback and improvement ideas to CERT-In while it is voluntary, primarily driven by your GRC or compliance team. Specific areas to be included in the scope should include your payment gateways and wallet APIs. From relevance perspective, you must comply with CERT-In and PCI DSS simultaneously. The shopping carts and checkout area is highly targeted by bots, fraud tools, injection attacks. Hence, it's relevant from a certain perspective. Your user account, wish list, loyalty systems. CERT-In looks at it from a PII, session management, and fraud prevention focus area. Your mobile apps. CERT relevance is subjected to OWASP, MSTG, SAST, DAST, and API protection perspective. Your admin dashboard and analytics platform. These are often misconfigured and with high privilege risk, hence that's of interest for CERT-In. Your third party scripts and pixels. Well, CERT-In looks at it that this can inject risk through front end code and session tracking, hence its relevance for CERT. Next is cloud native workload. From CERT-In, this must be audited using the CSA cloud control matrix. With this, we have come to the end of part 3. We are on track with our agenda. We'll continue with the agenda in part 4. Thank you for the time that you have invested till now. See you in part 4. This is your host, Savit Vittal Salyan. Namaskar.